Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out to Texas Public Radio and for spending your Wednesday evening with us. We really appreciate you coming. Welcome to the Essa TPR event series that takes a look at the history, the events, the food, and the culture that makes San Antonio the special place that we know it today. This is a series inspired by San Antonio's designation as a creative city of gastronomy, which we've had since 2017. It's a distinction that we're really, really proud of to have here in the city. Today's event is in collaboration with the City of San Antonio World Heritage Office, as well as made possible by our sponsorships from Frost and HEB. A special thanks to Tripoli's, who's found in Alamo Ranch Parkway. Yes, woo, for popping up with delicious cuisine from the Middle East and North Africa. So please, if you haven't already had some of the delicious food, make sure you pick some up while they still have some outside. Before we start this conversation, I do want to remind everybody that we want this to be a community conversation. So we want to not only talk up here, but if at any point during the conversation you have a question, a comment, something that you're curious about, something pops up, we do have two mics set up, or just one mic actually, set up on this side, on your right-hand side, my left-hand side. So if at any point you have a question, please feel free to come up and ask. The last panel that we did, we were a little shy and nobody came up to ask a question. So I would love it if one or two people would just come up and ask something. I know our panelists here would love to answer your questions and any curiosities that you may have. So to get us started, I would just like to have the panelists introduce themselves. So Nadia, if you can introduce and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Nadia Mavrakis. I'm the co-executive director of Culturingua. We're a nonprofit here in San Antonio that celebrates and elevates the people and heritage of the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. And we have a big focus on supporting community and economic development in the greater medical center area. Originally, I am Libyan American and grew up in Dallas, but have lived in San Antonio for over 10 years.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Essa Yousafzai. I own the Afghan Village restaurant. We have a few locations throughout Texas, now in Oklahoma as well. We also have a bakery in the medical center area as well. Moved from Houston to San Antonio, and I'm loving it so far. It's not as crowded as Houston, but we have, as Nadia said, it's a culturally rich society in that area, so we have very good food, and it's nice to be in that location as well. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Gloria Colom Braña. I am the cultural historian for the city of San Antonio. I work with the Office of Historic Preservation, and I have been working and collaborating with a lot of the stakeholders to create the Silk Road Cultural Heritage District. And
I'm Bilal Deiri, born in Dallas, but I've been here almost my entire life. I serve on the board of Culturingua with Nadia, and part of the family, along with another family that founded Pasha Mediterranean Grill, Baklava Bakery, Zaatar Lebanese Grill, and Nara Cafe. And we've kind of pieced together that little corner that has all those restaurants there. So we're really excited about the things that the city's doing, and can't wait to see what transpires.
A big round of applause for all of our panelists today. So to get us started with this conversation, I'd love to talk about the location, because before we talk about the wonderful food that comes out of it, it's important to know why this area is important to San Antonio and its cultural heritage and the food as well. So when we talk about the Silk Road Cultural Heritage District, we're talking about the area on the Wurzbach corridor that goes up towards the medical center. And this is one of the most ethnically diverse areas that we have here in San Antonio. So for whoever wants to start off with, maybe Gloria, what makes this area of San Antonio so special, and why have we decided to try and go through the process of naming it a cultural heritage district for the city of San Antonio?
yes, of course. So what we now are calling the Silk Road Cultural Heritage District has representatives that stem all the way from Northern Africa to Eastern Asia, but that includes Southern Asia. So the reason, and Central Africa, Western Asia. It just really represents half of planet Earth. So there's no way to condense it and just try to simplify or minimize the absolute richness in cultures. And it's not just culinary cultures, but really food is the language that unifies people. And it's what people can share with each other in a public-facing way, as we see with all the amazing co-panelists that I have right here, that are just some of the many different people representing so many cultures that are sharing their food and parts of themselves with the greater community, with their own communities, but also with the greater San Antonio. And there's multiple reasons why this area developed, but the medical center had a part in it, USAA, and other businesses had a part in just how people began to congregate in the area and bring family members and bring more family members, and word of mouth spreads. This is something that happens throughout the world, and Wurzbach just happens to, the Wurzbach corridor just happens to be one of those areas. Now, I do want to clarify that it's not just Wurzbach. There are groups of businesses and communities that spread north and south of Wurzbach, but they're all kind of centered around the area around the hospital, about a mile outward or 2 miles outward around the hospital.
Bilal, I understand that you played a pivotal role in getting the idea of a cultural heritage district for this area. So talk to us a little bit about that and the role that Pasha's played and that you've played in trying to get it off the ground.
Yeah, I didn't think anything was going to happen, honestly. It was just kind of, conversational. The District 8 representative, Manny Pelayas, kind of frequents that area and pops in to the restaurants and just around. And so I had gotten connected with him. And I've always, you go to any large city and you see well-known cultural districts that, are named. And I've just always felt like that was something that was missing in San Antonio. And I've seen it developing in that area. I grew up in that area. In District 8, almost my entire life. So I've seen how it's grown and how it's changed. And, I couldn't think of a better way to describe it other than the Silk Road, because it really kind of encompasses everything that you would have found as far as trading and all of the countries that you would have kind of come across doing trade throughout the Silk Road, just with all of the influence that we have there. So I just threw that suggestion out to Manny, and he passed it up the food chain to Mayor Nuremberg, and I guess he liked the idea, and it kind of carried on. And Nadia and the people at Cultural Ringwa, which I hadn't met Nadia yet, had been working and doing things to try and accomplish something similar. So things just kind of aligned nicely, and here we are.
Nadia, do you want to talk about your role in getting this cultural heritage district off the ground?
Sure. So as Bilal mentioned, this was part of Culture Ringwa's strategic plan related to really kind of codifying the district and, and like also increasing the public art that's in the community through creative placemaking initiatives, really making it sort of this like a place that the assets and the richness of the culture in the community are really exemplified beyond, and it's well known beyond just the people that live or are sort of very immediately connected to the community. And so once this CCR, the council consideration request, was put through, we started to reach out to, and we'd already been working with many different city departments on very similar initiatives with not only the World Heritage Office, with the City of Gastronomy and the Arts and Culture Department, but once it got moved to the Office of Historic Preservation, we reached out to the Office of Historic Preservation, and we said, we've been working with the community. We've had a lot of discussions with different coalition members. We've in another kind of work that we do. We formed a coalition about 2.5 years ago called Pathways to Prosperity. Essa is a member of that coalition. It's a coalition of community-based organizations and community residents focused on the medical center area. And so we had already come together as coalition members, as community members, and thought about like, what is it that we want to see, and how this cultural district is kind of, what's the future of this? How can we envision what this could move into? And so then we reached out to the Office of Historic Preservation, and we shared, these are some of the things that we've been working on in the community. These are some ideas that have come up, and like how can we work together to kind of really solidify this into something that's codified within the city. And so it's been really amazing to work with Gloria. Along that path. And so, we're really excited about the upcoming designation. And then also we've had a number of festivals that have really celebrated the heritage of the community and all the richness of the diversity of cultures. And so, as an example, our last festival was an arts and culture festival last year that featured a 12-foot puppet of a Syrian refugee girl who has traveled around the world, and we wrote a custom play, which was a play about the culinary heritage of that area. And it was a play about these 3 aunties from different areas of this region that Gloria described, from North Africa, the Middle East to Asia. And they're all talking, and then they see this girl happens to be a 12-foot puppet, and they say, oh, we need to cook a community meal for her. And so we cooked this community meal literally as part of this participatory play with the residents, the 400 community members that we had that were at the festival. And so it's really just been, I think, just this amazing kind of just journey of like putting on different events and having community conversations that really help sort of codify this district.
And Essa, what has been your experience like having a restaurant and the market in this really culturally rich part of San Antonio? What's your experience been like?
It has been amazing, and honestly, the main reason of me opening a restaurant in this area was because of the people living in this area. We start with the migrant people who eat the same food that we eat, but then it kind of expands to the American public in general. I've worked with the U.S. military in the past. I'm from Afghanistan, so Afghanistan is like the heart of Asia. And in this corridor, as they have summed up everything, that there's Asia, Africa, Middle East, and other ethnicities. They loved our food back then. And when they know that there's an Afghan restaurant, all of them come together to the restaurant. The experience has been amazing, and that's why we're expanding. We have a new bakery on Wurzbach and the intersection on the Wurzbach. Recently, after in 2021, when the U.S. forces withdrew, a lot of the Afghans actually migrated and came to the same spot. So it's kind of a magnet where all these migrants' families come together and they live in the same place. So you would find all these stores who sell halal food, halal meat, and all the necessities that they require. So it has been amazing so far.
Can you explain for those of us who might not know what exactly is halal and what that practice is and why it's important to have a place within this area that sells halal food?
Correct. So it's basically kosher food. In Islam, the animal has to be slaughtered in a specific way with the name of God on it, and if it's not slaughtered that way, then the Muslims cannot eat it. But we have been blessed that in this corridor we have so many places, including ours, that they sell it. So anybody can eat halal food, but the Muslims cannot eat the food that's not halal.
And I think something that you all have touched on is that this area is not a monolith, right? It is not fair to blanket it in one specific way. Like the people that are in it, the cuisine is just as diverse as the people that live within it. So can you all talk about, whoever wants to take this question over, about the diversity of cuisines that you'll find in this corridor and what you guys have experienced with that?
Yeah, I can talk just a little bit about it, mainly because my office has been compiling a list and trying to survey as much as possible for the entire region. But yes, there is food that represents places such as Thailand, Vietnam, India, China, sorry, and even like regional Chinese food. If you go more a little bit to think of places like Lucky Noodle that are a little bit more to the east outside of the corridor, but there's still kind of the way that I've been looking at this hasn't been as like a solid block, but rather as radius, like an outward radius, where there are still pockets and areas that have different types of food, but then there's also different countries from the Middle East that are represented in Northern Africa and Central Africa and Central Asia. And so it's just such a huge and all-encompassing region. And even within those regions, there are sub-regions as well. And we've actually been trying to think about it more as in language families rather than countries, because some of the people who have come here over the decades, their countries might not exist anymore, or there might be new countries in the area. So we've been thinking about cultural language groups and food groups. And yes, and just another thing that I wanted to mention is that restaurants, and I think all of you can attest here, are some of the hardest businesses to run. So there has been a rich diversity and movement of restaurants that have been coming and going, and new ones that continue to spring up that we're keeping an eye on.
And I'll just speak to that, like from a personal perspective. As I mentioned, I'm Libyan American. So Libya is in North Africa. It was colonized by the Italians. And so there's a lot of sort of pasta dishes that are really rich in tomato sauces. But that's not very common in the rest of the Arab world. So a lot of, even just within just the Arab world, which is even just a subset of the group that we're talking about, there's a rich diversity of cuisines. I just want to do a shout out to Tripoli's, which is the pop-up here. They're actually a Libyan restaurant, and it's like, I think it's probably one of the few Libyan restaurants that you can go to in the whole country where you can get really authentic Libyan cuisine. So you guys should definitely, there's one Libyan dish here tonight, but you should check it out and actually try like real authentic Libyan cuisine, which is really unique to have in a restaurant setting. But then, like when you look at other parts of the Arab world, there's some overlaps, and then you kind of move further east into the Middle East, and then you get into Iran, and then there's, it kind of like starts to morph, and then you get into Afghanistan, for example, Issa's restaurant, and I always talk about the mantu that he has, and that like like most of the dishes I think on Issa's menu I was never familiar with before I became familiar with Afghan cuisine, but of course they're so delicious. And so like even myself as someone who comes from this community, the diversity when you look at, across all of the different the different countries that are represented, there's just so many different cuisines that are represented in the area.
Essa, can you describe your food for us and what kind of food you serve? What are your typical dishes that you have, or even ingredients that you use?
Yes. So as I said earlier, Afghanistan is right in the heart of Asia, and its food is inspired by so many cultures, like from Persia, from Iran. Mantu that she mentioned, it has been in the culture for a long time. We have spices and herbs that are inspired by India, for example. There's cumin seeds, you have clove, you have so many different spices and herbs that it's not even available in the US, but it's being imported from Afghanistan. Saffron is one of the best in Afghanistan, coming from a province called Herat, which is the main ingredient in the dishes in Afghan food. One of the dishes that she likes is mantu. It's basically dumplings you might have seen in the Chinese culture as well, but it's completely different in a way that the ingredients inside is different. It's spiced ground beef with a lot of spices and herbs, different kinds. Then you have kabuli palau, which is, everybody knows about it. It's the main dish, very, very famous all over the world. Just like biryani in Pakistani Indian dishes, we have palau, kabuli palau in the Afghan cuisines. Then we have different kebabs, which kind of overlaps with the Middle Eastern food, but ours is a little different because the spices are different. And then you have, Afghanistani food, I would say there are 3-4 main things. It's the rice that, in different dishes like, for example, if you have a kebab, there should be rice with it. Or there's bread and the dairy products that, like, for example, fresh yogurt that you serve with it and different sauces that you make out of it. But yeah, I mean, different dishes, different tastes. As I mentioned, a few more, the whole grilled chicken is cooked in a way that is different than others. Yeah.
I always think that the savory yogurt is such a wonderful component of, it's so different than what one might initially think, because you think yogurt and you think something maybe sweet, but the savory component is always something very refreshing in that kind of dish. What about you, Bilal? You have za'atar, you also have baklava, which is the bakery, and then pasha. So what kind of dishes do you have in those restaurants, and how would you describe those flavors?
That's hard. Well, we started with pasha, so I'll start there. And my background is, on my father's side, we're Syrian. So we have that kind of Eastern Mediterranean flavor. And then the other family involved is Persian. So we mixed, those two things together, and we ended up with something really interesting. And I think the most interesting thing that happened was that, well, one, I think we were the first people to introduce naan bread in the city. I don't think anybody else had ever done that before. And now you find it everywhere. Before that, you would find pita bread in most restaurants, and it was just kind of the, store-bought stuff and reheated. And so besides Indian restaurants, other than that, but as far as Arabic food or Persian, we were definitely the first. But anybody that was looking for Middle Eastern food or Greek or Turkish or Persian, anyone that came in, they all felt like it represented them. And I thought that was really unique. So we would have like Greek customers come in and they were like, "Oh, this is the best Greek restaurant." I was like, "Oh, yes," And then Syrian customers would come in and say the same thing. And, so like everyone would kind of say the same thing. And I just always felt like that was, we had found kind of a really unique sweet spot in kind of picking little bits of different elements and kind of piecing them together so that a lot of different people kind of felt at home when they came in. Because there is a lot of overlap in a lot of the different foods, but there are some subtle differences. And if you can find those sweet spots, you can make a lot of different people happy. So that was one thing that I think we were able to do a little differently than a lot of places that were maybe more focused on, a single country or even a single city, right? Because within countries, from north to south or east to west and city to city, you can find differences in flavors or techniques and things like that. Yeah, I mean, baklava was the next. No, Nara was next. And Nara wasn't super heavy on the food. That was more, cafe, lounge, hookah, kind of hangout place. And then we worked our way into baklava, and that has become something really unique. If you've never been to baklava, you have to check that out. But we started off super small, with just the basics of baklava, right? And added slowly, mixed in some European elements to it as well to kind of appeal to a broader customer base. And again, because, so we have our head bakers are Palestinian, and a lot of the, just like Nadia mentioned, the Italian influence, the Eastern Mediterranean had a very heavy kind of French influence. So there is kind of those lingering effects of, in some of the sweets and some of the cakes and things that people made, besides the kind of traditional Middle Eastern sweets, you find a lot of those kind of French-styled cakes and sweets that worked their way in, but morphed into kind of different things. So that's something that you see and that you'll find in baklava if you visit that location. Zaatar is very Lebanese, and that one we kind of shifted and focused a little more on a singular country and a singular flavor profile, I would say. Yeah, I don't know. It's been fun and interesting and a really unique experience along the way, and it just brings people together in ways that you don't foresee, from the customer side and internally from the staffing side as well. Being in that district and having so many different kinds of people live there, it creates a really unique work environment. Sometimes good and sometimes not. But when it works out, sometimes you have this kind of like initial people trying to figure out the language barrier and the culture, and then when they break through it, it's the coolest thing to see these, like, all these different people that speak 5 different languages, and they're all somehow communicating and doing all these tasks together. So it's really representative of the corridor and what it's become. It's really unique.
I just want to ask Bilal, what's that new dessert you have at baklava? Because I was in a few weeks ago, and your staff was like, "Oh, do you want to try such and such?" And I was like, "Oh, what's that?" And they're like, "Oh, it's all over TikTok." And
The Dubai chocolate.
Yes,
Chocolate, the infamous chocolate.
Yeah, one of those TikTok trend things. And we've just been riding the wave, kind of going with it. The guys were able to make it really well, and it, I don't know. I still don't understand how, a chocolate, like a chocolate shop in Dubai can make something, and that's just wild to me how it can influence people in that way. But I mean, we had people calling. We have a small store at 1604 in Culebra, and we had people calling there, and it's not known for desserts or anything, but they're calling the store and, "Do you have Dubai chocolate?" Just because it's, some sort of Middle Eastern restaurant, trying to find it. And so, yeah, that was a unique trend.
For those of you who aren't sure exactly what it is, so it's a chocolate bar, and the inside is a pistachio cream, I believe.
Pistachio cream, tahina, which is the sesame paste, and like it's kataifi, which is like little strings of phyllo, crispy phyllo.
it's really good.
It looks delicious.
I can
when you cut
attest
it
to
in
that as
half.
well.
It looks delicious. Well, I want to expand on something that you said, Bilal. Before I do, though, a quick reminder, if you have a question, a comment, feel free to come up to the microphone and ask our panelists. But I want to expand on something that you said on how people receive food and how it yields expected and unexpected things. So food is like the binder for us all. We come from different backgrounds. We come from different flavors, Mexican, Polish, Asian, Middle Eastern. And so you resonate, whether it's your culture and your heritage or not, with food and the way that it brings people together and like breaking bread. So how has food been the unifier in this cultural district? And then also in just how has it changed maybe over time that you've seen? Whoever wants to take the question.
It's changed a lot. I'll start, I guess, just because we opened 16 years ago. And so from that time to now, at that time, people didn't know what hummus was when they would come in. And now, when you walk into HEB, you find chocolate hummus and avocado hummus and all sorts of, odd flavors and things like that. So, I had a customer that used to come in all the time. He was a restaurant guy. He had owned restaurants and things like that. And he told me something. We were having conversations all the time when he would come in. And he mentioned something at that time. And he was saying, food trends, unfortunately, follow conflicts, right? And, Middle East has unfortunately had a lot of conflict, and our country has had their hands in a lot of conflict in the Middle East. So slowly that trend has kind of brought its way here, and we've seen that trend grow and expand, as we've, since the time that we've opened, because again, in 2008, it was still not too far off from, Iraq War and Afghanistan and things like that. So, those things take a little time to kind of take hold, and for people to come back and be looking for things, and more people to be displaced and to move here, right? And to grow that kind of base that you need for it to expand. So seeing it grow in that way from, having to explain what hummus was to now you see it everywhere. I mean, on the plane, you find hummus, and people, knowing what the non-bread. I mean, people still call it a huge tortilla, but they do it in a joking way, right? Like it's like, it's not the way that it used to be, right? Where they were serious when they call it a
Now the
tortilla.
tone's a little different. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's been interesting. I hope maybe one day we can get to a point where, the trends aren't following conflicts and they're following, just simply breaking bread. But, we'll see what happens.
I just want to add, several years ago, former Mayor Phil Hardberger was awarded the International Citizen of the Year Award, and I attended his award ceremony, and I remember him talking about how San Antonio is, really on the cusp of moving from a bicultural city, which is an amazing aspect of our culture that we have, to being an international city. And I feel like this cultural district is part of that sort of move into really like celebrating this big diversity of cultures that we have in San Antonio. And I think it's truly this asset that we have in San Antonio. And I think about conversation that I had with my son's surgeon. So he's this renowned surgeon from UT Southwestern in Dallas, and he was recruited to come down to work at UT Health Science Center. And he said that he and his wife were really apprehensive about losing all their favorite restaurants and all their unique restaurants, the Korean restaurant and the Arab restaurant, et cetera. And they moved, and they were really worried that they weren't going to find the diversity of culinary experiences. And so then they were really excited about all of San Antonio's culinary experiences, but including the Wurzbach corridor, and being able to find all these like really unique spots that were, just really unique to the cultures, and being able to like have this diversity of cuisines. And so I think it's just it's really awesome that we're at this point that it's now really being officially designated, so that that knowledge goes far and wide, and it's not just about word of mouth, but it's really something that people hopefully on visit San Antonio and other places will say, well, oh yeah, this is a destination. So,
Did you have a question?
So I have a question for the group.
Absolutely. What's your name and what's your question?
My name is Joe Solis, and can you please discuss the Islamic influence of in San Antonio that's over 500 years old? I recently attended the mayor's fundraiser at the Richard Herrera law firm. There's an amazing Islamic fountain in the middle, and even Spanish words like ojalá, Allah, alcalde, Allah. And when you consider the Spanish, came here over 500 years ago, you look downtown, you see all the tiles. How has that influence, which is literally 500 years old, influenced what you all see and do every day?
Okay, I'll try to start that answer, but that's like an awesome question, and I'll do my best, but others can jump in. But yeah, the Moors ruled Spain for 800 years, if I'm not mistaken, and so there's this huge influence of Islamic architecture, particularly if you go to southern Spain, to Andalusia, to Granada, to Sevilla, to Cordoba. Just these, you see horseshoe arches, and you see like one of my favorite Islamic architecture features is called muqarnas, and my husband who's a native Arabic speaker, is always like, muqarnas, what is that? And I was like, well, I learned it in my Islamic art history class when I was in college, and yes, it's a real Arabic word, but it's like this honeycomb design in domes and arches, and so you see that when you're in southern Spain, and so naturally that kind of architecture influence has come as well when the Spanish came to Texas, and then you're right, like from a linguistic perspective, there's so many cognates that have that were sort of adopted into Spanish that were Arabic words, or vice versa. I think I have this really cool infographic that was published by Qatar Foundation International, which is an organization that supports Arabic language learning across the US and in Europe. And they have like this really cool infographic of all these Arabic words and all these Spanish words and like the cognates between them. So there's definitely like a really strong influence and like really similar cultures in so many ways. Does anyone want to add to that?
I was just going to say there definitely is. I wish that the people would talk about it more. Right? It's something that it's there, but we don't really learn much about it. It's not necessarily in the curriculum. You don't grow up understanding the connection, and I really wish that it was, because it would, I think, break a lot of barriers if people understood that connected past that has just kind of been removed.
And I did also want to add that same Spanish migration, first conquest, like let's call it what it was, and then migration into what is now Texas also influenced the food, the local food with ingredients that were not found locally. So we think even things as simple as garlic and onion and a lot of the herbs and spices that came from that the Spanish brought, but that the Spanish themselves did not invent, or were not the first to use in certain combinations that have influenced even how tacos are made here. So it's very indirect, very, very, very indirect, but it's here. And also in the research I was doing, there has been a Syrian and Lebanese presence in San Antonio since the early 20th century. A lot of them were Christian, but they did also bring the Arabic language early on, and they did bring different cultural cuisine and different traditions as well. So it is multi-layered. It is very contextual. Oftentimes it was, again, as you had mentioned, conflict at home, pushing people away to have to find new homes and new lands in different waves of migration over time. And we're talking about different, like right now we're talking mainly about the areas that are represented in this space, but all, like if you think about the Silk Road, other waves of migrations of other groups of people have come in, especially since the late 19th century into the early 20th century. So maybe I'm not going as far back as 500 years or the 300 years that San Antonio celebrated recently, but definitely for over 100 years, waves of migrations of people have been adding texture to the cultures of San Antonio.
Essa, anything to add?
I think they provided all the information, but just quickly, I see some Hispanic customers in our stores, and sometimes we ask them their names, and it says Omar. My middle name is Omar, and that name, then kind of explain to them, how this Arabic got just like she mentioned, the artwork that she saw in the magazine, and how the Arabic language words got into Spanish. Just a brief history, but overall. To his question, these days, in the present time, in the corridor, we have an Islamic center, which is also another piece of the magnet that brings the Muslims together. It's not just the food, but also the Muslims want to be near to where the Islamic centers or the masjid or the mosques are. So that's another thing. In San Antonio, we have a huge presence of the Muslim population as well.
We have another question. What's your name and what's your question?
Thank you. Hi, my name's Randall. This first one has been morphing over the past several minutes based on, I think, Joe, was it? Yeah, you mentioned earlier that Arabic influences have been in the area for 500 years. But you mentioned Phil Hartberger, I think, talking about how San Antonio was a bicultural city at one point. And so I guess, have there been any sort of challenges in making your mark here in San Antonio's cultural landscape, given this monumental presence of Mexican and Hispanic influences going back 300, 400 years?
Who wants to take that question? You can let it sit for a bit if it needs to.
So I'm from Dallas, and if anyone knows Dallas, Dallas is extremely pretentious, and so when I came to San Antonio, I mean, I was sort of like, ew, San Antonio, it's like that fourth big city in Texas that no one wants to live in, but I've totally changed, and now San Antonio is my favorite city in Texas. I have lived like all over Texas, and I think that for me, I feel that my personal experiences and my professional experiences have shown that San Antonio is so welcoming, and San Antonio, because of that bicultural celebration, it's actually even more welcoming than other than you might think, because we already have this amazing understanding of both cultures, and it's we want to learn about other cultures, and so I actually see that as an asset to the culture of San Antonio, and that so I personally haven't wouldn't say that I've experienced that. I think that there's definitely some pressures, not from the culture perspective, but rather from, I'm trying to put this delicately, but maybe from sort of a development perspective around the medical center, where some people may view this area as blighted or, different, or refugees, or, we want to make the medical center a great place to live, work, and play, but only for certain people, that is. And so I think that that's the pressure that I see more of, not necessarily not wanting to celebrate this diversity of cultures, but rather sort of from a real estate development perspective, and sort of pending gentrification pressures. That's what I feel a lot more than it is about the culture. I don't know if anyone wants to add.
No, I agree. I think it helps. It helps you. I don't know if blend in is the right word, but in a place that it's already kind of mixed, you don't feel as out of place, in a kind of more homogenous type of society. So, I think it's more helpful than anything.
Good. Second question, and this one might be a little bit easier. You talked earlier about how you had sort of split up into cultural groups and language groups as opposed to nations and nationalities, that kind of thing. What about age groups, generations? We have this really strong emphasis in America on, we identify with our generations, boomers, Gen X, millennials. Is that kind of generational identity common in the Silk Road?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think that, one thing is that, my initial reaction is to say generational identity is not that strong, but really more intergenerational like family units is really strong. And so it's very common that, you're in college or you've graduated from college, but you're not married. Like you're still living with your parents. Like that is normal. Like it's abnormal to not be living with your parents until you're married, for example. And so, or like this, having grandparents living in a home. And so like, I think that there's this really strong like intergenerational cohesion within the culture. And I'll say so my father is Libyan, my mother is from St. Louis, and so as a second generation Arab American, I think that that sometimes it's a struggle to understand like both identities and to like, grow up in Texas as I did, and really feel, I really felt like I was really Libyan. And I was like, yeah, I'm really Libyan. I didn't go to Libya until I was in my early 20s, but I still had this huge Libyan identity. And then I got married to my husband, who is Libyan, and I was like, whoa, I am so American. Like, so like, I think that struggle, I think, is one thing that people feel, or like people who've maybe they've immigrated here when they were children, and so they've grown up in the schools here. I think that is probably a struggle of identity, but like I still feel like there's this really strong intergenerational connection.
There's a Nahuatl word, nepantla, which means the in-between, which is like it encapsulates that, I feel like, a little bit, neither here nor there. So it's like you're a little bit in both places at once. How do you think food, and going off of that, how do you think food helps to connect you with those parts of your identity or those parts of your culture, whether it's yours or whether it's one that you became aware of later in life, or how do you think that food kind of plays into that?
I'm not sure how to answer that. I definitely relate a lot to that feeling because I'm also mixed, right? My mother is American, right? Not any specific one thing. She's kind of a mixed person, and then my father is Syrian, like as Syrian as you can get. So and I had that same kind of, like when the first time I went to Syria, like I felt very American, like and then here you feel different too. So it's an odd thing, but I think it's an asset in a lot of ways, in the sense that it gives you a really good perspective on a lot of things, that sometimes people just can't see. You're able to kind of step back and view things in different ways. So I don't know.
I'm gonna just jump in, and I'm gonna put my folklorist hat, as that is my background. And when we study food, we're studying senses, we're studying memory, food, the smell, the flavor, the process of making, the process of learning and passing down through generations. It really triggers memory and sensory and memory placemaking in a way that nothing else can. So just having a smell of a specific food can invoke memory of place.
Yeah, that's true. And my dad was the cook at home, so I think I related more to that culture in eating and things, and it kind of embodied a bigger part of me, growing up eating that. So that was a big thing for sure.
And I just want to add one thing before the questions, which is that in my family, my mom is American, but she really learned all of these different Libyan dishes, and then she would like write it down in really strict recipe form, like very American style. And like, for example, there's this Libyan dish that you can get at Tripoli's called macarona mbapapka, but my mom, in my family, we called it Libyan mac. Like, so, and it was like, she and like everything was, like how many teaspoons, how many cups, how many this, and then I I'll ask some Libyan auntie or something like, how do you do that? Like exactly how many teaspoons? They're like, are you joking? You just like eyeball it. You
with your
eyeball
heart.
So it's just like that. But because my mom has like written all these recipes down, I'm able to like. My dad was not the cook in the house, so like because she's written them down, I can like recreate these Libyan dishes, albeit like sort of very Americanized versions of them, I guess.
Training Middle Eastern cooks, like prep cooks, is the worst. Like, you cannot, like, they all want to do their own thing. They don't want to use measuring spoons or cups, so they will find random measuring components, how much salt did you put? Oh, it's 5 of, some sort of thing that they found that they measure with. And it's like, what are you measuring with? Why are you? And I don't know.
It's an estimate. It's más o menos. Yep. Maybe this or that. Yeah, absolutely. And our final question of the night. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I drive my daughter to UTSA every day, and every time I drive back, I always see the sign for a prominent Mexican restaurant. And my question is for the Muslim panelist: How do you all feel in the age of political correctness having a restaurant called Matamoros, or Kill the Moors?
For context, that is the name of a city in Mexico. And for historical context, it is very problematic.
So I'll just say that my daughter's in a Spanish immersion program, but I speak like very little Spanish. I think I was on a call the other day with someone, and he said, "¿Qué más?" Is that right? He said, "¿Qué más?" And I was like, wait a second. I got like really nervous. Like, wait, I think you're saying, what else are we talking about in this meeting? So I didn't actually know that, I guess, until you just said that, is my first reaction. And then I'll pause for Bilal, who I think wants to say something.
Yeah, again, it's just, how do we break these barriers down? And, there are some really painful points in history, that I think those names go back to. But we can easily learn from those points in history if we can kind of rewind a little bit and learn about all the things that happened prior to that.
Anyone else with anything to add?
I had a question.
Go for it, Jackie. Get you the mic. And this will be our last question of the night.
Okay, hi, I'm Jackie Velez. I actually work here at Texas Public Radio. Anyways, my question to you is, because you were talking about generations, is it harder to keep the culture alive as the generations, go on and there's less and less of that authentic culture? Does that make sense? How do you keep it alive?
I would say yes. So I married my wife is from Iraq, so I made sure to keep it alive, kind of like she did, right? Her husband's from Libya. So like, everyone's gonna find and you see the culture getting lost in a lot of people coming here, and it doesn't take long. So, I don't want to lose that. I want my kids to maintain that connection. Who knows if they'll be able to visit Syria like I was able to, So, I think it's important for us as a family unit to be able to do that ourselves, and hopefully like developing things like this cultural district and things within the district and the community itself can also to help do that, kind of like you see here in San Antonio, right? With everything that makes San Antonio so unique.
Yeah, I think it takes a concerted effort, and I definitely feel that. I mean, like for myself, I had a big interest always growing up, and like I didn't speak like Arabic at home growing up. Maybe just like a few words here and there, which mainly revolved around food, like chicken and bread and things like that. But like I made an effort to study it like as an adult in different points in my life and formally, and also like Bilal said, I mean, I wasn't like seeking out a husband from Libya per se. It just sort of happened. But I think that I've always had this like strong connection, and then like we make a strong effort to kind of infuse that with our children. We try to go to Libya every other summer. They take Arabic classes on the weekends. We just started a Cub Scout with a lot of Cub Scout pack rather with other Arab families, so they can be around other Arab youth growing up. But it's definitely a struggle.
Essa?
I agree with both of them. I would just add that first of all, I'm a little different than Nadia and Bilal in a way that I grew up back home. Both of my parents are from Afghanistan, so I wasn't a stranger when I was growing up there. Even when I go back, I just blend in very easily. Over here in the U.S., I think it's relatively easier to assimilate here than to go back there and assimilate if you don't know the language. I mean, everybody knows you're not from here. But in the meantime, another thing that I have found out that, I mean, I'm also married to an Afghan person, so it's easier to, it's not that it's good or bad to not marry here. It's just, it's easier to live together. It's like you already understand each other, and it's easier to, even if you want to discover something, it's like you both know. So in my case, I'm a little different than them, but similarity and differences at the same time.
So I come from an extremely different region of the world, but that question really also hit home very close. So I'm from Puerto Rico. My family has been U.S. citizens for many generations, but they always spoke only Spanish for generations. Very homogenous culture. And when I was very little, my family moved to Florida, and a neighbor asked my father, "Why are you speaking to your kids in Spanish? Don't you want them to know English?" And my father was like, "They're going to learn English in school." So I just wanted to leave it at that. Like, parents really have to make the effort.
And I think ending with that is the perfect way to end it, because this cultural heritage district and what you all have tried to do and are going to do with this cultural heritage district is to make this an area of San Antonio where you can trace that lineage, or it is something that is representative of yourself and of people in your community, and it's something that you're able to share with the rest of San Antonio. And I think that was a point as well earlier, where San Antonio is so diverse. It is not bicultural, it is multicultural. There is so much here that maybe people don't initially think of, but when they visit, for example, the Silk Road Cultural Heritage District, they'll see that this is an area of San Antonio that has really flourished and will continue to flourish, and that the designation is a part of that. I want to end this panel with kind of an homage to that. For someone who will visit the Silk Road Cultural Heritage District, so the Wurzbach corridor, what is a dish that you recommend they try in this area, whether it's from your own restaurant, Bilal and Essa, or from somebody else's, or just something that you think is special that you want to share with the rest of everyone today?
Okay. I think my favorite thing at my restaurant.
Dubai chocolate.
No, nothing to do. It's good.
The bottom of the list.
Yeah, no. And it's not, even it's a Persian dish, but it's the juje kebab, and I absolutely love it. It's a Cornish hen, saffron, and a little turmeric, and it's just fantastic. It's a really, really, really excellent dish. So yeah, juje.
Good choice.
In our restaurant, some people don't prefer lamb. So for the lamb lovers, I would say kabuli palau, which is very famous. It has the rice, it has carrots and raisins on top of it with the lamb shank. But those who like beef, chapli kebab, and those who like dumplings, it's amazing. It also has ground beef, but it has some other spices. For the bakery location, the Afghan bakery in Shiriach, they made fresh ice cream. They call it shiriach, literally translated into cold milk. That's a part of it. They literally make it in front of you. It's really good. And the barbari naan, which is the best in town, and they can try that as well.
So my go-to dish at most restaurants in this area is like a kufta, which is like a ground beef or ground lamb with parsley and spices mixed together and then grilled, and then with rice. And usually, correct me if I'm wrong, but usually it's served with hummus on the side, but I always switch that out for a garlic sauce. So that's what I like. And then I also really like the Turkish delights that they have at baklava.
And I also wanted to say that I'm still learning the landscape as probably the newest person here. But anytime that I'm in the Wurzbach corridor, I have to stop in baklava and get some baklava and some cannolis with pistachio.
Oh, yeah.
All wonderful suggestions. So now you have a list to try when you go and visit the Silk Road Cultural Heritage District. Well, a big thank you to all of our wonderful panelists today. A big round of applause for them. I also want to thank our sponsors, Frost and Saws, and our partners that make these series possible, the City of San Antonio World Heritage Office. Again, there is more to come for Great SA. We have covered so many cultures, so many types of cuisines, and there's only more. So please take a look out and be on the lookout for any more panels that we have. Again, a thank you to our panelists, Gloria, Nadia, Bilal, and Essa, for your time. Thank you all for coming and spending your Wednesday evening with us here. Again, if you haven't already, please take out or check out the wonderful food that we have outside from Tripoli's. And please take a moment, visit the Silk Road Cultural Heritage District. And again, thank you so much and have a wonderful, wonderful night. Thank you.